Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. At AM 630. WMAL.
637 on WMAL. Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson with you. Peter MORICI joins us now, University of Maryland economist. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
We were just talking about Bain Capital. What? Some people have called it a vampire-like firm because they suck the life out of companies and they get closed down and they still make money off of it. Obviously, there have been tremendous successes with Bain Capital. Is Bain fair game in this? Should Mitt Romney be running on it, or should he be running away from Bain Capital?
Well, it's kind of like in a trial where, the defense attorney puts something on the table, then he objects to the prosecution, grabbing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that Romney has put his business experience on the table and emphasized that as indication that he can create jobs rather than his program. He has not emphasized his program as much as I'm in the private sector, I know how to create a job.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is he's got some very significant experience, such as running the Olympics and running Massachusetts and so forth. Bain Capital is the wrong card to play, and it's just one more indication that this guy is a B candidate, not an A candidate. Basically, Obama is playing this very effectively.
Well, hold it a second, because President Obama seems to be making the case with his campaign that this was a company that just, killed off jobs and put people out of work. But that's not the record at Bain Capital completely. Sure, there were cases where companies were liquidated and jobs were lost, but there were also many, many, many cases where jobs were created and companies were saved.
But what does that have to do with the price of yak eggs on the plains?
Well, I'll tell you what I think it has to do, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, and I'm sure you will. I think that what it does is you're setting up a guy who will go into government and say, there are hard decisions to be made. Sometimes we can fix a problem, and sometimes we can make an investment in a problem and make it better. And there are other times where we need to quit throwing money down a rat hole, throwing good money after bad, and we're going to make the tough decisions, and we're going to shut it down. That's what I hope I get.
Are you watching your clock? Look how long it took to make that argument.
It took me about 25 seconds, which is an effective argument.
To go back and forth, Brian, it's too complex. Basically, Romney is putting himself out there as an experienced executive. And Obama wants to make this an issue of character and personality because he doesn't want to run on his record, the economy, and then, permit Mr. Romney to say, well, these are the specific things I'd do to fix it, and catch people's attention and imagination, especially in Ohio, where this election will be determined and he's running ahead. If we start to talk about the economy and Romney's prescriptions, they will sell well in Ohio. If we start to talk about Obama's character and Romney's experience, Obama can come across much more effectively because things like venture capital, private equity, and so forth don't sell with those people who would be Reagan Democrats today. They don't sell well. And so what he's basically doing, Mr. Obama, is shifting the campaign focus to personality as opposed to his record, and to experience as opposed to prescriptions. It's a very successful pivot.
So politically, you would, if you were a Romney campaign, you would be focusing more on your time as the governor of Massachusetts and the guy who ran the Olympics in 2002 or turned the Olympics around?
Exactly, and what I would do is, yesterday in response to Bain, I would say instead of the man is attacking private enterprise, those union members in Ohio don't give a damn about private enterprise. They give a darn about getting a job. And as far as they're concerned, unions protect jobs and all this stuff. Well, he's got to basically go out there and say, look, I know why you've lost your jobs. You've lost your jobs because of imports from China. We've lost 6 million manufacturing jobs, and until we wrestle them back, we're not going to be successful. The fact is, bringing manufacturing back to the United States is not going to replace 6 million jobs. That would be demagoguery just as much as what Mr. Obama did yesterday was. But that's what goes on in campaigns. Let's be big people and acknowledge that,
right,
and not so much focus on the exact accuracy of the argument. But if he did that, then he'd have Obama back on his heels, because Obama promised to do something about it in 2008 and didn't. And I'd be hammering that, and I'd be using his statements, and I'd be putting Obama back on his heels. But instead, what Obama keeps doing is putting Romney on the defensive. He's like a boxer without technical competence, Romney. That's the problem here. He's a B candidate for letting Obama do it.
Wow.
It's almost as if Cory Booker was setting up the deal yesterday. He attacks Obama, and then he walks out in his press conference. I was at Fox waiting to go on yesterday when he did it. He says, when you're president of the United States, you can't just worry about making a profit. You have to worry about finding Mabel a job who's lost her, who needs her training and this and that. It was so perfect. It was so choreographed.
Well, but a president should be investing anyway, right?
True.
It has nothing to do with being the president of the United States of America.
It's not a campaign to win the hearts and minds of policy wonks. It's the hearts and minds of waitress mom.
Right.
That's the problem here.
You make a good point on that one for sure. Can we turn the pivot to a new direction?
You're just being nice to me because I'm a guest.
No. I admire you because you sell copiers. That's what I admire.
That's the problem with WMAL. They're not using my copiers.
Well, yes, we hear your commercials now on WMAL.
That's right.
We love them.
All right, so let's talk about Europe briefly because we got to talk about it. I mean, Greece is imploding. The Eurozone is said to be in serious trouble. How much, I guess the bottom line is I don't care about those folks except how it impacts the U.S. economy. So how does it impact the U.S. economy?
Well, first of all, a couple of things. Europe slowing down means less markets for U.S. goods. Remember, it's the world's largest economy, not China. The second thing is Europe being such a mess pulls down the value of the euro. And that makes German exports, which we do compete with in other places. I mean, they make turbines, we make turbines, and on the list goes. Much cheaper than they should be. Germany is not a very productive or efficient or creative or imaginative economy. Sorry to disappoint you, but if you buy a Mercedes, you'll pay an awful lot of money for not a lot of product, and you'll get a lot of electrical problems.
That's right.
Okay, let's be clear. I mean, it's a snob good, all right? But what you've got is a situation where they essentially get an undervalued currency. And we have to then GE does have to compete with Siemens, which is a very fine engineering company, but Siemens has the advantage of an undervalued currency, which makes their products more cheaper. Now, that's what's going on now. Now, what if Europe crashes? This time around, if Europe's banks crash, unlike when our banks crashed, we know where the problems are. The Europeans aren't nearly as creative as Vikram Pandit in New York, who's very good at hiding the ball. We never really knew where the loans were until it was too late. We know exactly where the problems are this time around, and I would be very disappointed if Ben Bernanke didn't have a ring he could pull to put capital into U.S. banks where he needs to.
Well, ultimately, is this
to offset the effect of something like that going wrong? Now, if Europe had a recession, it would shrink by, say, 3%, smaller market, but it's already going to shrink next year by 1%.
Is this a nation problem in Europe, or is this a banking problem ultimately, because the banks are going to be holding the money that's going to be worthless? One
of the realities of the modern age we live in is that there's no difference between a banking problem and a nation problem. Mm-hmm. The way to understand who Jamie Dimon and Vikram Pandit are those guys in lacy clothes in pre-revolutionary France. They are our aristocrats. We must bring them money every day, and their dogs eat steak, even if we can't afford hamburger for our children. I mean, look what Vikram was paid last year. No, there is no difference between the banks and the government. It's an insidious circle. We prop up the banks. They make campaign contributions to both candidates, who in turn make sure that the Federal Reserve and Treasury are staffed with people who got their apprenticeships at Goldman Sachs and will return there to earn their money when the
You're
time
starting
comes.
to sound like the Occupods.
Well, there is some truth.
Yes.
The reason they have appeal is to establish institutions on the left, like the AFL-CIO, like the unions, is because there is some truth in what they say, just as there was some truth in what Marx says. That doesn't mean I'm going to run out there and pitch a tent.
Right.
But the point is one of the problems we have in Washington is that conservatives think that everybody on the left is absolutely wrong, stupid, brain dead. Okay, and everybody on the left thinks all the conservatives are immoral and sinful. The reality is there's some truth in their arguments.
All right. Dr. Peter MORICI, who had his Wheaties this morning. It's good to have you have our show this morning.
See you, Peter.